Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport. Hey George, thanks a lot for joining me.
Hey, my pleasure.
Nice. It was great to meet you at AWSI. How did that show go for you guys?
I think pretty well. It's amazing to see how the industry's grown. When I started my business, there were virtually no hydrofoil companies at all. I think Lift was just starting, and there were maybe like 3 French companies that were offering foils. This would be over 10 years ago now, and
oh wow!
And now, so you couldn't buy a foil. If you wanted, you could buy a Lift. Or you could order a French foil and send money over there and wait for a couple of months and it would show up eventually. But I decided at that time, we shouldn't have to wait months to get one of these things. Why not make one here? And I've always been interested in aviation and kites and boats and sailing and wind power and a trained engineer. So I had a good background for that. And even as a kid, I always really enjoyed making things, taking things apart. I was just that kind of person, I guess. Yeah. So to see AWSI where, every brand now has a hydrofoil. I mean, there used to be hydrofoil brands, but now if you make a kite or you make a wing, then you also make a hydrofoil, right? So there's hydrofoil companies like AWSI and Armstrong, I guess Armstrong's making boards and wings now as well. But now, even companies that have made kites in the past now have foils, right? So, it's unimaginable. What would you say? There were 20 foil brands there, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there were some that weren't there. Yeah. Yeah.
That's true, actually.
Yeah. So in a way, since I got into this pretty early, and I feel like there's been a lot of aspects of it that I pioneered that have sort of now become pretty normal in that space. In a way, I felt kind of like, man, I'm getting run over. There's just so much competition, and the quality of the foils has come up. Even at last year's AWSI, there were some foils which, I looked at and, could feel so superior. Like, oh God, look at that. And this year, everything. I didn't see a single foil that looked bad. The quality has come up, the construction, and people have really started to figure out what makes these things tick. I didn't get to ride that many. I was an exhibitor. I would have liked to have tried a lot of the foils there, but it's not for exhibitors to try the stuff. It's for retailers to try the stuff. I'm not going to walk up to my competitor. Hey, can I try it? I probably wouldn't go over that big. But yeah, I saw some amazing things there. In some ways I felt like, man, this is getting to be a really competitive space. And in other ways, I was kind of heartened to see that the quality of the hydrofoils that are being offered are really coming up to what they need to be. And I think really the catalyst for it all is winging.
Mm-hmm.
The first 7 years of my business was exclusively for kite foil applications, and initially exclusively just for racing. That's what I was into. I wasn't a high level competitor by any means, but we had a great group of people starting in the early days that competed in Florida a bunch. We went down to Puerto Rico. It was the same group of 15 guys, and we always had a great time. And
nice!
Everyone got good, and that's what racing does for you. If you want to really jumpstart building your skills, racing will do that, but it will also humble you tremendously.
I can imagine.
Especially if you're racing against people that, are really freaking good. But in a way, I think that humbling experience helped me. It kind of helped me figure out, what my goals are, what my expectations could be. And I feel really privileged that I was able to get into foiling right at the beginning. And I always saw the potential. I mean, I saw it for the first time on videos on YouTube. And when I saw it, I said, like, that is it. That is the thing. And back then, no one was doing it. Like, it was it looked like a circus act or something, but then it's come to fruition. It's one of the few things that I've been right about.
Hey,
Yeah.
That's awesome. Can we talk about a little bit about the early days that we were talking about before we came on recording? But
it has, hydrofoiling's got a really interesting history. Like, even back in the 50s, there was hydrofoil water skiing. And these were kind of like contraptions, but they actually literally had water skis that were sort of bolted together, so they weren't independent. But then underneath, they had these big V foils. I mean, they were very difficult to ride, but people were riding them in the 50s, and you could buy a kit and build these things. And so it's not an entirely new idea. And then the first time I really saw it was this thing. I think I saw it at a boat show, the air chair. This guy, Matt Murphy, and there were some other guys, and he had invented this water ski hydrofoil, which it was like a board with a lot of rocker. It had an aluminum foil under it, which was very crude, very low aspect ratio, nothing great there. And then it had a pedestal that you sat on, and then you were seat belted to the pedestal, and your feet went into bindings at the front of the board. And the thing was heavy, so when you wore a life jacket, you kind of floated like ready to go. Like, it was under you, you floated above it, you were lined up, the boat could give it the gas and you'd come up, and now you were foiling. And because of the way that you were strapped in and your feet were in, just by lowering or raising your hands, you could, lower or raise the foil. And but those guys, I think, became pretty popular for water skiing, and they were doing flips and jumps, jumping wake to wake, and it was amazing. And I wasn't a water skier. I didn't want to do that. But it really planted the seed in my mind of the potential of it. And then I think the next time I saw it were videos of Laird Hamilton and Rush Randall in Hawaii, towing in big waves. Those guys, what they wanted to do. And they were using snowboard boots with clip-in bindings. And they had...
That's insane.
And then they had like a leash between the bindings so you could pull so that, you didn't drown. You could free your feet. And then you'd only be like in the surf in Hawaii with giant waves coming with snowboard boots on, right? Sounds like a good idea. And the foil, I think Rush Randall had a foil that he was selling. It was all aluminum, super heavy. And I said, like, yeah, that's interesting, but this idea that your feet had to be like that rigidly planted was really like a turnoff. It made me think that the hydrofoil really wouldn't be controllable short of having boots like that, or short of being strapped into the air chair. Like, it was, it didn't seem like it was rideable. And then I saw a video on YouTube, and this was just when YouTube was starting. And it was this guy, Marc Blanc. He was a Frenchman. And this freaking guy was riding a piece of wood. Like, literally a piece of wood that you'd buy at Home Depot. It wasn't like maybe 3 feet long, 18 inches wide or whatever. And it had a hydrofoil strapped under it. And he even had like a diagonal piece of wood to stiffen the strut to the board that like went to one side. And he was riding it strapless, like no straps at all. Like, there weren't any straps on the board. He was riding a tiny little kite, looping the thing around, and he was ripping. like doing 360-degree turns, jumps. And as soon as I saw someone riding it strapless, I said, "This is it. This can work. This does work, right?" And there was a guy called Mango Manny who had a company called Carafino, and I think he was probably the first guy that was selling carbon foils with like a twin tip type board on top, made in Asia. And they were reasonably priced. They were like $1,000. I ordered one, and the wait was long. Like your money was gone and you were waiting for this thing to show up. And he had a lot of business problems, like delivery problems, quality problems. He seemed like a good guy, and he was without a doubt a pioneer, like one of the first guys out there. So finally this thing comes, and I'd been kiteboarding for a while. I was a pretty experienced kiteboarder, and I'm trying to learn how to ride this thing with the foot straps. I got my feet jammed and my ankles are just getting twisted. And, and you're used to like a skatey thing, like a twin tip or a surfboard. And now this thing's just planted in the water. It doesn't slide, it just wants to go in one direction. And like after a couple of sessions, I said, like falling to leeward with the foil coming up at you, the whole shit.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
I put it away. It was in my garage for another 3 years. And then I don't know what, maybe I saw some more videos of people riding or something. I don't exactly recall, but at some point I took it out of the garage. So I'm going to ride this thing. And I took the straps off and learned to ride it strapless, which I think was a good move because, you really need to be lined up with the foil, as you know. Like you can't use your ankles to muscle the foil back into alignment. That doesn't work.
No.
So I learned to ride that foil, and I was riding it, and people were freaking out. Like, people at the beach were wigging out. They did not know what they were looking at. And it had only been like 10 years ago, because I got into kiting very early, like in 99, and flying 2-line kites.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 lines, eh?
Yeah, I had the Whippica 5-meter that I bought from Hawaiian Pro Line. That's all you could get. I had the 3.5 meter and the 5 meter. And I think they had a 7.5 or a 9, which the word on the street was it wasn't good. But yeah, people were freaking out when I started with that, but they thought I was an idiot. Like, actually, there was one guy who came up to me and says, "Yeah, we used to watch you and we laughed at you. We thought you were so stupid." and like, "I can't believe you actually made it work. That's great." I said, like, "Well, yeah, thanks, But yeah, with the hydrofoil, like, and literally and the thing is that it worked in such light wind, right? Like you go out at 10 miles an hour, and kite foiling works great. And literally I'd ride in the evening. We have super smooth wind here. And I came back to the beach, and there were like 10 people on the beach, and they gave me an ovation.
Nice.
And then I said, all right, I'm going to step it up. So I purchased a Spots 1 race foil from France.
Oh.
And the thing came, and compared to the Carafino, this thing was beautiful. Like, well, streamlined. The Carafino was pretty chunky, and the quality was not great. But going slow, it was fine. No, I sold it to a buddy, and he sold it to somebody else. Like it was like owning a Vespa scooter, right? Like it's kind of, you just pass it on to the next guy. And the build quality on it was pretty poor. It kind of started to the board started to delaminate and come apart. But so I got this French foil, and I thought, I had been hydrofoiling for a year on the Carafino. I thought, like, well, I'm just going to go and ride this thing. And that thing was really hard to ride. It was like learning all over again. I could ride it just barely on port tack, and on the other side, I couldn't ride it. Like that was the level. Like on my dominant side, I could just barely ride it, and on the other side, I couldn't ride it at all. And then eventually I figured it out and I could ride it around. I started racing on it. I met Damien Leroy and John Modica and Nick Leeson down at the first regatta in Puerto Rico. And at that point, I had already built a foil. So I brought my own foil and I brought the Spots one. And yeah, I got totally humbled in Puerto Rico. It was super windy, super choppy. And I was trying to ride strapless because, you know, I'm so cool. And
yeah.
I couldn't get to the windward mark. It was just exhausted, just pummeled, you know. And Damien and John, like, they figured it out right away. They were riding lift foils, or the Taroa sword, which was another French brand. It was basically the Spots and the Taroa sword that were the dominant foils at that time. And they were, like, for the time, like, you could race on them, you know. But then things changed. Like, the Spots 2 came out. That was super dominant. Everyone raced on that. And I was, like, building foils and selling some, but truth be told, they weren't great. I mean, they were pretty bad. You know, I mean, but all the foils at that point were not that great. The Spots 2 was kind of a breakthrough foil, and it was the first foil that had the thing where the wings kind of went up and then came down. So it looked a little bit like a seagull. And then I was an engineer, and I knew, like, for minimum drag and maximum efficiency, you really wanted a perfectly straight wing, you know? And I just kept trying to do that, and it's really unstable. And even now, you'll never see a perfectly straight wing. No one offers one. And there's a reason. They suck. Yeah, they don't work. So that's the first thing I had to learn. I was very stubborn. And so the Spots 2 was super dominant. And then Mike Zychek in San Francisco started to design foils, and he really nailed it. And what he really understood was that the foil needed to be extremely stiff. Because if it wasn't super stiff, what happened when you're going fast, the board and the wing just aren't connected in a solid way. So the foil starts to do things that you didn't tell it to do on its own, just due to flexure. And then you're, like, trying to catch up to it and make it do things. And he also was the one that came up with the mass connection that a lot of people are adopting now, that F1 is using, and a number of other foils use it, where it kind of clamps onto a channel at the top of the fuselage instead of going into a cavity, which was, you know, the other way of doing it. And that creates a pretty solid connection. So I have a tremendous amount of regard for Mike and Stefano. I think Stefano is underappreciated. I think he contributed tremendously to the success of Mike's lab. And I think, you know, Mike's lab just became entirely dominant in the race scene. And that's kind of when I had to get out of it, because I was able to design something that was close to the performance of a Mike's lab, but he kept improving the freaking thing. And, you know, and he had the benefit of having two people to collaborate, where I was kind of on my own. And also, he was in the right place. He had the top riders right there in his backyard testing for him. And, so then I had to switch gears. And when I first got into building hydrofoils, I had, like, certain goals that I wanted to do, and there were things that I absolutely didn't want to do. I only wanted to make race gear. I only wanted to use carbon fiber. I don't want to use any aluminum. And I wanted to make it in the United States and not use Chinese manufacturing. And in the end, I've done, and I didn't want to make recreational foils. Everything that I said that I didn't want to do, I have now done. You know? Just goes to show.
Well, yeah, it's not easy. And
no, I think that was just a lot of learning I had to do.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, those lessons from doing the race foils, I think, benefited me so much when I changed focus to doing more recreational stuff. So initially I was just doing more recreational kite foiling stuff. And then I started to get into the surf side of things just about the time that Alex Aguirre came out with the Go Foil, kind of exploded that.
Okay.
But it was funny because I think Alex did a really great job with the Go Foil. He was definitely a pioneer. Actually, Damien Leroy was thinking that surf foiling might work. But because there were no foils that were specifically designed for it, it was kind of a hard thing. The wings were too small. You don't really need very big wings for kite foiling.
No, you don't.
And Alex came up with a system that really worked in the conditions in Hawaii. He had kind of a very thick wing. And I looked at it and I said, like, it's not logical. It's not really efficient. You don't need a wing that thick. But what was amazing is that everyone exactly copied him, like blindly. Like, Alex has got to have the thick wing. It's working. That's a thing that works. And I was working with John Modica at the time, and I said, like, no, I think it should be thin. And he says, no, everyone's going thick, dude. It's like, maybe you need the drag to keep you on the wing. And I said, if we need more drag, I'll just build a bigger wing. And you'll have more drag and you'll have more lift, and that'll be good, right?
True.
Eventually, like, it took 3 or 4 years, but eventually people abandoned the thick wing. But for a while, it was all, and I'm sure that when Alex designed it, that it was the right thing for the local conditions that he had, and for the skill level that the riders were at that time. Now things have changed dramatically, and I don't know, I had been screwing around with really high aspect ratio wings as well. And even people that tried it said, like, nah, this is just too hard to control, but the glide is unbelievable, right? And I think Signature or one of those South African foils, I'm not sure if it was Signature or Unifoil, were the first ones that really cracked open the market with high aspect ratio wings, that they just showed everyone that that's going to work now. And now, look at the wings that are being offered by Axis, by Moses, by Armstrong. Really high aspect. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course, I've gone that way too. That I had already been doing it. But the thing is, when wing foiling hit, you needed to offer much bigger wings than we were offering for kiting. Although we already offered a 1500, but it's funny. Like, so we had these bigger wings, but for wing foiling initially, they weren't big enough because wing foiling at that time required a huge wing. And it's funny, all these things go hand in hand. There's a reason for all of it. And the early hand wings that we were using, and my favorite at the time was the F1 Swing.
Oh, that was awesome.
It was the lightest, simplest thing. I mean, it was the best wing at that time, for sure, in my eyes. Very easy to handle. I really liked how light it was. But none of these things was stiff. So when you were trying to pump up, you're pumping it, and yeah, sort of the strut with the handles is going in and out, but the thing's also going like this. So you couldn't really develop a lot of thrust by pumping at that time. So you really needed a lot more hydrofoil and we weren't as good at it.
No, it was brand new.
Even now I see, one of the things that beginners typically do, well, they can't get on foil. They have really to struggle to get on foil. An experienced rider on half the size of wing and a smaller hand wing than a beginner is on will pump up onto foil, no problem. But a beginner will just stand there holding the wing, waiting for the wind to put them on foil.
Exactly.
Well, it takes a lot of wind to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you have enough wind to do that, you're super lit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Once you get good, yeah, 100%. You're almost ready to go down to a smaller wing at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But beginners have this thing. But now, subsequently, what's happened, and a lot of it is these better materials like Alula. I'm a big fan. The cost is high. It's not. I can, like, if you're a kid in college, or you have bills to pay, you got a family, spending $2,000 on one hand wing may not be what you want, but they're damn good. I'm a big fan. I think Ocean Rodeo is crushing it, like, for such a small brand. Huge innovator on the material side. I think their wings are great, and now that's the other thing at AWSI, who didn't have an Alula or equivalent type material wing. Everyone.
That's a thing. Everybody's innovating. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people follow. I think Ocean Rodeo innovated.
Better put. Absolutely.
I think actually the amount of innovation is kind of small. It's like the next big thing at AWSI right now in the sport. The biggest thing, downwind paddle foiling, right? Narrow boards. Well, who developed the narrow board? People don't even know now, but it was David Kalama, or unless there was somebody else in Hawaii that was the predecessor of Dave and inspired Dave, but Dave certainly seemed to be the first one to put that out there in, on a bigger audience, to make it aware of that as a possibility. And I'm a big fan of that. Not so much that I feel like that is something I want to do, because I don't think conditions in my area are that conducive to it. And also the logistics of finishing somewhere where you didn't start. And also, I think, for someone my age, it would be more difficult just due to the physical demands of what that is.
It's not easy.
Not at all. But I think that type of board is ideal for beginning to wing, for beginners. Because I had an experience with a guy that bought a setup from a very well-known manufacturer here locally. And the board must have been 28 inches wide, 6 feet long. And then a big ass hydrofoil, 1800, 2200 wing. He had an 1800 wing. And he was doing well, but he was quite an athlete. He was like an expert skier, did ski patrol. So he had the skills. So he was doing okay, but was kind of struggling with the jibing and needed a lot of power. And he was interested in Delta. I had met him and I said, hey, look, I have a foil company. Maybe you should check the foils out. I'd help you. And he said, yeah, I want to try. Let's switch when we're out there. So finally the day came. I was out, and I was on my 700 square centimeter raceway, which we have in stock now. It's at that time it was a prototype, but we put it into production. We have them. And race strut, 100 centimeters long, and he was on this beginner setup. So we switched. I was on a 4 meter. He was on a 5 meter. He was foiling. I was foiling. So we switched boards out in the middle. And I wasn't expecting much. I thought, like, this is a smaller wing. Like, this is literally a third of the size of what he's riding, what he's used to riding, right? This freaking guy gets right up on foil, sails away, jibes, comes back, does another jibe. Like, for him,
no way.
It was like an enabling moment. Like, his gear was keeping him back. Like, was killing him, literally. He was ready to step it up, and he had this gear, right? Meanwhile, so I'm stoked, super stoked to see that he's enjoying himself. He's not crashing. He's not wrecking my stuff, So I'm on his gear on a 4 meter. I can't get up on foil. No freaking way. I could get up on foil on my 700. I can't get up on foil on his 1800. The amount of drag off of that board, this 6 foot by 28-inch board, right? And this was one of these boards where they moved everything forward. The tracks are forward, so you're kind of in the middle of the board. You're not on the tail. You can't pump it with your legs as efficiently, right? Because you can't pivot. Like, you're in the middle. You go like, it's just, I mean, and it was so frustrating. You know what it's like not to be able to get up on foil when you want to be on foil. And it was windy, right? That's like,
my buddy had an early version of the slingshot. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a long board. You were in the center. I needed a lot of power to get it up, but as soon as I got it up, I couldn't point because it would just want to turn like I was on the top because the foil was so far forward. It was terrible. It was the same kind of feeling, but I couldn't get it to do anything that I wanted it to do. It was easier on my 80 liter. I think I had the first version of the KT boards. I said, you get up faster on this board than you do that board. It was 150. And you tried it, and it was a lot easier.
Yeah, so then we switched back, and, then I have to admit, I struggled to get up on foil on my stuff, too. I was on a 4-meter, and then he was like, unfortunately, he has the habit of riding in the choppiest, like, least windy spot in our local area. Like, I had to sail down to him in a place where I never sail because the wind's lighter and the water's more messed up. But eventually, when I worked my way out of it, I was all set again. And he ordered a Delta the next day, he tells me, "Man, I can't believe I wasted a whole summer riding that other gear." I said, like, well, that's just the way it goes. But what it made me realize is that maybe we're doing a great disservice to beginners, because this is the type of package that is very commonly sold to beginners. Like, oh, you need a big foil because that'll make it easier to get up. Oh, you need a big board. That'll make it easier to stand up. And then generally, I'm not, and then a lot of times, like, depending on the manufacturer, and I'm not going to name anyone, that's my pledge. I'm not going to name names. But the boards, possibly that setup is not very cheap at all. And then maybe you save a little bit of money by buying not such a great hand wing that doesn't power up well. It's a terrible combination to learn on. I really believe that. And it's making it harder for people. And I think that these downwind boards are really maybe the ideal solution. And I wouldn't go super narrow. I wouldn't do like 20 or 18 inches. Like, what if you did 22 inches or something, 23 inches. Okay. But 6 feet, 6.5 feet, 7 feet, whatever. Like, now the thing, you can develop actual board speed because the board goes through the water well to get you to lift reasonably without having to be entirely lit out of your mind, And then I don't think you would necessarily grow out of a setup like that. I think the only downside is the cost. Like, conventional, if you were to buy a 90-liter board or whatever, that might be $1,400, $1,200, and I think for one of these downwind boards, well, they're hard to get now. It's probably the only thing that the industry isn't over inventory on. Right?
Is that? Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure by next summer there'll be plenty of them, and hopefully the cost will go down. But one problem with them, like, if you have a board that's less than 6 feet, you could ship that by UPS or FedEx. But I think over a certain length, those carriers won't take it anymore. And I think these downwind boards are now over that dimensional weight requirement. So they're going to be expensive to ship, and it's going to add to the cost. But
they do take off quick, though.
Well,
yeah,
wouldn't that be great for a beginner to take off quick, right?
Yeah, like I had one at the hatchery when I was down. I think it was the 90 liter, or it was 19 wide from KT.
Yeah.
And I had a 4 meter wing that night, and there wasn't a lot of breeze, but as soon as I stepped on, there was current there and a bit of stuff. It already started to take off. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Imagine,
So then I got
imagine if you were on something that was 6 feet long and 28 inches wide or 30 inches wide. You wouldn't have come up on foil.
Yeah, I've been on some of those boards that are just planks of plywood with no shape and they're super sticky.
Yeah.
And especially when the foil, like the early foils I found, like I hopped on an Armstrong pretty early. So in Slingshot V1, I think the Slingshots to the Armstrong. And then it was insane the step up and the difference from there. But I rode another buddy's foil that had, it was just like I was riding in molasses. I couldn't move the thing. And it would get up. It took forever to get it out of the water. I was struggling to get it out. As soon as it was up, it would hit a wall at about, I don't know, 15 miles an hour or something. And then that was it. That was all I could do. And I was like, I can't move this thing. Give me back this slippery little Pete that I have from Armstrong. It takes off faster. It glides. It surfs. It does all these things.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to see the differences in everybody and how much tech is involved and all of that kind of stuff.
But, that's the kind of gear that typically gets sold to beginners.
It is.
And that's what I'm saying. Typically what they get is an economical wing, which, and there are some wings that are good that don't, that are in the $1,900 price range that are nice and stiff. I think the Cabrina Mantis would be one that people should consider. But, if you get a floppy wing with a huge board and a huge foil, good luck. I have seen beginners here, like when I was kite foiling, no one would come. Like no one wanted to get into kite foiling. It looked too crazy, too dangerous, impossible. It just didn't look like something that people thought they could do, right? Then the wing foiling comes along and it's viewed in an entirely different light. Like people see it and they see themselves being able to do it. And we have new people showing up at my beach all the time and a lot of beginners. And I'll say this, if they stick with it, they learn to do it. But it could be a year.
Oh, yeah.
It could be longer.
Take some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm on Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I live right near the town beach. So I could just walk down. It's about a couple of 100 meters. And I've got an outdoor shower set up. So it's ideal. Like I look, it's either windy or not windy. If it's windy, I just grab my shit, go down, get in an hour or two, come back, take a shower, pop a beer. It's all beautiful.
Oh, nice. Good testing zone then, because you get in the water quite a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, the wind, typically we get a lot of 10 to 12 mile an hour days, which are great for kiting. I wouldn't say that it's ideal for winging, but other times the sea breeze will come in at 18, 20 miles an hour, and that's great for winging. Some of the new wings with the better materials, like a 6.5 meter wing now can really get you going in 12 miles an hour pretty well. And I pretty much only ride the 700 wing. And I find that works pretty well, even in light wind. For me, I weigh about 165.
Oh, really? Okay. Well done.
And even when I put my friend, that intermediate rider that was riding that beginner stuff, the 700, it didn't, it's not hard to ride, bottom line. And I have it here. Let me see if I can grab it.
Let's
to
take
give
a look
you an
at
idea of, because a lot of people have sort of the wrong idea about this kind of wing. So its aspect ratio is 11. And this is my daily driver. And I think anyone can ride this as long as they have power. Everyone thinks, high aspect wings, it's going to be pitchy, it's going to be hard to control. It's not it could be if the wing is poorly designed. But if the wing is properly designed and properly manufactured, there's nothing about a high aspect wing that intrinsically makes it harder to ride. It is true that, as you change the pitch of a high aspect wing, the lift changes more rapidly than it would on a low aspect wing. But I don't think that really makes it hard to ride. And my progression, 3 years ago, I would have told you a 1450. That's the perfect size for everyone. And then, people around me kind of pushed, like they started riding smaller wings. We have a racing scene. Bristol Yacht Club hosts a series for us, a couple of regattas. So we have about 7-8 people locally that want to race, and also some people that travel from Massachusetts and stuff like that. It's a great group of people. And then I dropped down from the 1450 to the 1280, and that wasn't bad. And then I dropped down to the 1050, which was a higher aspect wing, and that felt fine. And then the 850, and then when I went to the 700, I wasn't sure. I said, is this really going? Am I gonna really be able to get up on foil? Yeah, it's all I ride now. Really, I don't keep a lot of wings around. If I have wings around, people tend to buy them and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And so pretty much the 700's all I have around. I have a 1740, and I have a huge flat water pump foiling wing, which isn't in production. I don't think we'll put it into production, but it's 1.6 meters in span. It's about 2,000 square centimeters. And I use that on a 60 centimeter strut just for flat water pumping, like what Devin Mans, the wake thief guy, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I've been doing that this summer and learning how to do it. At the beginning, I could maybe go 50 feet and then topple over. It's a skill. It does. I think it's helped my fitness a lot, and it's a great thing to do when there's no wind. And
do you find your progression from that 14 down to the 7? Is it skill? Is it
every step was easy?
The evolution? Was it the evolution of the wings?
I don't know. The wing design was always pretty similar. I always used the same airfoil section. So if you cut the wing perpendicular, the shape that you would see when you cut it, the cross section of the wing, that I kind of use the same one for every wing. So that doesn't change. And in our line, the aspect ratio increases as the wings get smaller, which is logical because I can't make an aspect ratio 11 1450 because this wingspan would be enormous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a 1450, off the top of my head, I don't know what the aspect ratio is, but maybe it's 7 or 8, right? So the 1740, the 1450, and the 1280 in our line, which are called high aspect wings, I think now we'd call them more mid aspect, but they're all the same aspect ratio. They're just kind of scaled down versions of each other. Okay. And then when you drop down to the 1050 and the 850, those have higher aspect ratios. Maybe those are something like 9, something like that. I have the 850 here, so the 850 looks something like that. I don't know how to get it in the frame exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty good. We can see it.
Yeah. It's all sort of like mirror image. I'm confused by it. And then, when you drop down to the 700, then it jumps to the next aspect ratio. Like the 850 and the 1050 are already pretty high aspect ratio wings. But I think it's logical I think it's necessary to make your higher area wings lower aspect ratio. Because I find that when the span of a wing gets much over 100 centimeters, they become harder to control, harder to turn, less maneuverable. So I was never like a huge fan of wings that had 115 centimeter span.
Okay.
Of course, I'm riding a wing that has 1.6 meters span now for a very particular, but I can tell you that it is hard to ride. It's very locked and roll. And I tried, and it's also hard to have a strut system that's stiff enough to support a wing that big. But the R-frame is stiff enough. But at 85 centimeters, that wing was very, very difficult to ride. And when I shortened the mast down to 65 or 60, it became pretty decent to ride. So a shorter mast is also pretty instrumental in making larger wings easier to handle.
Okay. Because I tried the new 1650 from Armstrong, their pump foil. Really? It was a lot of wind, mind you. I can't remember the tail that he had on there. My buddy had that with an Omen board. I just found it was more wind, but I just found it was slow. I didn't know if it was on purpose, but I found it was slow. It went upwind, but I guess that's the only one I had written at that time.
Why would you ride a wing that big?
It was just to try it out, try it out for fun.
It's surface area. You know, there's two things. So, I don't know. I studied a lot of wing design and wing theory and aerodynamics, and so much has been done for airplanes in the 20th century. If you think about how rapid the development was, that the Wright brothers first flew in 1903 or 1906, something, and they hopped in the air for 36 seconds. So that was 1906 or something. And then, if you think that in 1969, we had a guy standing on the moon.
That's a heck of a lot
65
of progression,
years. 65 years, and we stuck in 2 world wars and a Great Depression to fill it in, right? Imagine if things were going a little bit more smoothly.
True.
There's just so much work that's been done by the predecessor from NASA, which was called NACO, which was National Aeronautic Council something. And all these reports are published. So how airplane wings work is very well understood, and there's nothing new. There's not much more advancement going to happen there. And hydrofoils are just basically underwater airplanes, more or less. There's some distinct differences, the way it works is that the smaller of a wing that you have, the faster you have to go. Because if you think about it, your weight is your weight. So if you weigh 160 pounds, 170 pounds, that's what the hydrofoil has to lift. A hydrofoil always has to provide your weight in lift. Otherwise, you're going to either pop. If it provides more, you're going to come out of the water. If it provides less, you're going to come down. Right. So whenever you're foiling, you know exactly how much lift the wing is producing. It's your body weight. And the amount of lift that a wing produces, it's a very simple equation. It's the lift coefficient, which is related to the angle of attack, the surface area. So it's the coefficient of lift times the surface area times the density of the fluid, which is water. That doesn't change. Times the velocity squared. So the velocity, every single term in there, it's multiplied only by once. But with velocity, it's multiplied twice by that number. That's the velocity squared. So the amount of lift changes very rapidly as the speed changes, right? So in order to go fast, you really need a small wing, because then, because of that surface area term getting smaller, the velocity term has to get bigger. And it's something that's referred to in aircraft design as wing loading. Okay, how many pounds per square foot of wing area do you have? And as your weight loading goes up, your speed goes up, you know? And the only way to make a big wing try to make a big wing go fast is to get that angle of attack really low, which makes that coefficient of lift low. So that's, you know, another number. But then when you're really riding nose down like that, the wing starts to become kind of squirrely, and you have the drag of the size of that whole wing. So what's become very clear around here is that the smaller wing you ride, the faster you go. And actually, they don't ride that bad once you're up on foil. I think the only downside to riding small wings is getting up on foil. Like, getting up on foil can start to become a problem. And because of this racing thing, people are now riding 540s, 520s for winging.
Winging. Oh, whoa.
So same size that we were using for kite foil racing, basically. Yeah. And I have a 590 prototype, which is basically the 700 scaled down to 590. And I like it. Like, as long as you're powered up, it's not that hard to get up on foil. And I would ride the 590 when it's windy, and goddamn, it's fast. I mean, it
would be.
Rips.
It would be.
It's, I would say it almost feels like an entirely different sport. Like if you compare riding a 1500 or 1450 versus riding a 700 or 590, it's more dynamic. It's a lot faster. It kind of makes it more like skiing, almost like.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think, and I was shocked when I went to the Gorge. So this is what's happening locally in my group of peers, the people I like to ride with, is that they're just pushing this, and they've pushed me. Like, without them, I wouldn't have probably designed a 700, or it would have taken longer. The guys from Cabrina, like Brendan Healy and Evan Netch, also like started riding these small things. And I said, like, you can really ride these? And they said, yep, that's the only wing I ride. I only ride the 590 or the 600. I said, really? And they said, yeah. And like, of course, they're great riders, right?
Yeah, and they're powered.
Then I found, I wouldn't consider myself anything special on the water. I ride a lot, and, you know, I have sort of average athletic skills. I'm not a sort of super athlete. But if you're at it long enough and you ride enough, and I found, like, yeah, 700's fine. 590's fine. I did buy a race foil from a French company that, it's AFS. I bought the 560 race foil.
Oh, okay.
I saw that thing, and I was blown away by the construction. Like, what they did was just so extraordinary, really. So I said, it just became, I just saw it's like, I must have. So I bought it, and they like rushed it to me from France. And then the next day, the day after I got it, was really freaking windy out in the Northeast. I said, I'm riding this thing. So I took it out. I was super lit on a 4-meter. Man, did I struggle to get on foil. I could not believe, like, it was so, and this is after having ridden 540s and 590s. And this was a 560. So it was a little bigger than the smallest thing I've ridden. And I felt like I was pretty powered, and the board was just skimming. And I felt like, nope, this wing's not fast enough. And then I finally got up on it, and it was really loose, squirrely at low speed, super squirrely. And then, you know, once you get it going 18 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, it locks in. And then it just super slippery. Like, as much power as you can put down, it'll take it and go faster and faster and faster, particularly downwind. You get it aimed kind of downwind, and you just sheet in harder and harder, and it just goes faster and faster and faster. And I didn't blow a jibe the entire session. I didn't want to, because I didn't want to face getting up on that freaking foil again. But you just roll into the jibe with speed, and it holds speed so well because it's so low drag that you come out the other end real quick. You just don't let it get slow. That's all. But I just, the first 20 minutes I said, okay, this just isn't for me. Maybe this is for people in Europe racing or something. I'm going to go back and switch to my regular foil and call these guys and say, I've made a big mistake. You need to take this back before I hurt myself and give me my money back. And then by the end of the hour, and I was exhausted, like my heart rate was up. It's like, it was windy, rough, And by the end of the hour, I was like pushing it around and enjoying it. I decided to keep it. But it's a tough foil that you do get to a point where it's hard to ride. Like it is a challenge, and you have to be up for it. And I don't think it's for most. I don't think I wouldn't recommend that foil to most people. Some people would enjoy it, but I think most people would not enjoy it. I'm not sure that I would enjoy it, honestly. It may be too much for me, but I thought I'd give it a shot to see if I could grow into it or not. But in terms of people are very reluctant to drop down to a wing even as small as an 850. And I would say, don't be reluctant to ride an 800. Don't be reluctant to drive a 700. If they're well designed, and I can't say that every manufacturer has well designed wings. That's clearly not the case. Many of them do, some of them don't. I have some foil brands that I really respect and some that I don't.
What would constitute to you well-designed?
I think an airfoil section that really works well, and that's not something that you can easily see when you look at a foil. Another thing that's really easy is it stiff enough? Okay. And I think a lower level of stiffness is required for wing foiling than for the kite foil racing, where it was so crucial for control at high speed. And the speeds that people are doing now in kite foil racing are really pretty crazy. It's like 26, 27 miles an hour upwind, downwind, 30, 40 miles an hour. It's nuts, just absolutely nuts. And to keep that under control, it needs to be rock solid. Right now I think the Chubanga and the Levitas are kind of the two foil brands that are IKA certified. It's the whole racing scene that's now sort of highly regulated. It's the Paris Olympics will have kite foil racing in it. Everyone in that class is aiming for the Olympics, and the equipment needs to be registered and it needs to be IKA approved, and it became, and it's tough for manufacturers, and now really the only competitive kite is the Fly Surfer VMG2. So in a way, it like brands are driven out. There's not a lot of money in serious racing, because the people,
it's not for everybody.
No. Well, it's absolutely not for everybody. And the people that compete at a really high level get their stuff at a heavy discount. So who actually pays retail for it, right? But no, I've had like that guy that I talked about switching boards with, he rode the 700 straight off. And when he was trying to make the buying decision for a Delta, I said, just get the 850. He said, maybe I should get something bigger. I was like, just get the 850, and he's entirely happy with it. And then he says, should I get a bigger wing for light air? I said, no, get a really high quality 6.5 meter hand wing and use that for light air with the 850.
Okay, so that's what you prefer.
Yeah.
At the AWSI, I tried the Silk 850, and I went out on a 60-liter apple tree board, I believe. And like I'm still riding a bigger wing from Armstrong, but so I wanted to see how slow I could go with it, what kind of attack, kind of like if you angle attack a little bit, will it drop out of the air? All those kind of tests. It rode phenomenally. Like I was very, very impressed with their 850. It was beautiful. It wasn't out of control like I had thought. And the glide and everything, it was a mid aspect. It's their newer one, their monoblock there that they came out with, and I was very happy with it. Really good.
I think if you tried a Delta 700, you'd be shocked. Like
be
that
the same.
maybe seemed, but this is what surprised me, that when I was out at the gorge, I saw like the local guys, what they were riding were like, it was a lot of Armstrong gear and big wings, like these sort of mid-aspect 1800s, and they were pretty thick. I mean, really a high drag setup, you know? And that was extremely popular with fairly skilled riders, honestly. Like good people that were solid on the water were riding that. And, you know, coming from this area where everyone is just going smaller and smaller, faster and faster. And
it'd been different,
I'm on board with it. Like I was shocked, like, what are these people thinking? And I think it comes down to just like local flavor, you know? Like,
yeah, it could be.
If that's the gear that, like, wow, I really respect Ted, and Ted says that, you know, Armstrong's the way to go, and they particularly have a very cult following. I mean, people that are loyal to them are loyal to them, you know? People that are loyal to Axis are loyal to Axis, and it's just...
It's fascinating how that works.
People that ride Delta are very loyal to Delta, but there's far fewer of them. and that's something I'd like to change. And I think the quality of the product is really good.
So what separates you, or what makes Delta unique per se compared to some of these other brands?
Yeah, I do think that the wing designs are really like the best. I mean, there's nothing in terms of designing this thing. I don't really think that there's anything better. Okay. I mean, there may be things that are equal to it or close to it, but there's nothing that really eclipses it. And I think also our wing line and our foil line is very simple. And I think a lot of consumers are getting very confused by having a choice of 20 different wings, 18 different stabilizers, 3 different fuse lengths, 4 different strut lengths. And particularly, I think I'm not a big fan of just the pick a stabilizer game. It seems silly to me. They may have slightly different feels, and maybe people that ride at a much higher level than I do are really onto something that I just can't feel or don't understand. But for me, one of the things I would rather make sure that a stabilizer is adjusted at the proper angle relative to the front wing rather than go pick another stabilizer. Like, before you spend $400 or $300 on another stabilizer, why don't you tune the stabilizer you have so it's dead nuts perfect? And I have a bunch of videos out there on how to tune using shims. And, you know, I mean, we can go through that, and I'd be more than happy to have another video out there if it reaches someone that hasn't. But, you know, really, if you, and then there's so much misinformation. Like I sort of preparing for this talk, I thought I should watch some YouTube videos of what other people are saying about hydrofoil setup. And there's some really cringeworthy stuff out there. People that don't know what the hell they're talking about, but they're still talking, and they're talking as if they know what they're talking about. I hear stuff like, "Oh, this stabilizer had so much more lift. The whole foil produced so much more lift." The stabilizer doesn't produce lift; it pushes down. It produces the opposite of lift. It's a downforce at the back, you know. So how is a stabilizer going to produce more lift? The way it produces more lift is that it produces more downforce, which basically sets the front wing at a higher angle of attack. And then you feel like the foil produces more lift. the stabilizer doesn't produce it. So the way a stabilizer works, let me grab one. So first of all, you have to understand that a wing is kind of like this, and the hollow part of the airfoil is at the bottom, and the top surface is curved because that's how you produce lift. The stabilizer is basically upside down. Like this is the curvy surface, and the top is the flat surface. So the stabilizer pushes down at the back of the fuselage, and the angle of attack is negative. It's not positive like the front wing, it's the opposite. So when the water hits this, it pushes down, right? And it's counteracting a couple of different forces. First of all, well, I don't know how in depth, but basically it pushes down.
Yeah, go to town. And, like we got the time. I'm happy to hear.
I'm not. Yeah, I've been accused of talking in too many details before. But
no, that's
basically
fine.
What the stabilizer. So interesting. One way of thinking about it, which I think is a really good way, right? So you have these things set up like this. This is pushing up. This is pushing down. Basically, what this stabilizer does is it sets the angle of attack of the front wing. So if you have a lot of down angle like this, it's going to make the front wing ride very nose up, right? And the best way of really understanding this is just experiment with it. Like take a little sheet of plastic from an expired credit card or gift card, and you could put it under the back, and you can increase that angle, so you're increasing the downforce, and ride your hydrofoil like that and see what it feels like. And what you'll feel is that you're always on your front foot trying to keep the foil from coming up out of the water. You're going to have a lot of front foot pressure, right? And it's going to feel like, oh my God, the wing is so lifty. The wing is so lifty. But it's also very slow. And you'll have very poor speed range. Like it'll be okay at low speed. It'll be very stable. The pitch will be very bushy. It won't be responsive at pitch at all. So in a way, that's easy for a beginner, right? But when you try to power up, you won't be able to go fast, because as soon as you speed up, it's going to just want to push you out of the water. And if you do it strapless, like you think, oh, I can compensate, I'll just stand further forward, it doesn't feel good. It's still not right. Even though now you've got your weight further forward, compensating for the excessive front foot pressure, the foil's just not riding. And then, you could use even 2 pieces of credit card or something back there. Just make it extreme so you can feel what it's like. And then take that same piece of plastic and put it under the front and try that, right? And then, so if you take it too far that way, now the stabilizer isn't producing very much downforce at all. And what will happen is that you'll find that all of a sudden the board is touching down all the time. Like you'll have to shift your weight back. But even then, like all of a sudden, like you'll have a lot of board touches, and also the foil will feel very sensitive to pitch. Like you'll have to make a lot of tiny micro adjustments. And again, I think the best way to do this is without straps. If you're comfortable riding without straps, that way you can micro adjust your feet to be anywhere you need to be on the board. But you'll still feel these trimming differences. If you get it exactly right, and a credit card is pretty thick, you could even go to thinner shims to micro adjust it, like a piece of water bottle, single-use water bottle. You can cut a square out of that. That's thinner. And just get it adjusted. When you get it exactly right, your foil will feel so fast and just lively over the entire speed range. It'll feel good going slow, moderate, and the top end, the foot pressure will not change over the entire speed range, and it'll feel great. It'll feel responsive, quick. So my question to all these people that try stabilizers are like, did you adjust it? Like that stabilizer that you're trying, did you adjust the angle so that it's exactly right? Because if you didn't, and you're trying 4 different stabilizers, and you find one that makes your foil feel great, maybe that was the only stabilizer that was at the right angle.
Okay.
Right? So if you're going to compare stabilizers, and I absolutely support people experimenting with their gear. I love that. Everyone should do that, right? Once you're at the level that you can feel what it does. It's not something that you want to do as a beginner, obviously. But just if you're going to compare stabilizers, take the first stabilizer and find exactly the right shims that make that foil as lively and responsive and, adjusted as it can be. Your favorite shimming for that stabilizer. Take the second stabilizer you want to test and go through that same experimentation to find exactly the right shims for that one. Take the third and write it down so you know, okay, this number of shims for this one, this number of shims for that one. Do it for the next one. And then once you have the perfect angle for each single stabilizer, then compare them.
Okay.
Properly shimmed. And now you're really comparing apples to apples. Because otherwise, I can tell you, we're offering 2 sizes of stabilizer, but we're going to be offering more. I do it reluctantly because I don't think it's that critical of an aspect of it, but people are demanding it. And the industry trend right now is towards smaller stabilizers. And unless you offer it, your stuff looks out of date and people look at it.
Okay.
Like, oh, that doesn't look too good. I don't think I'm going to buy that. So, there are pressures. And I will admit that, I think you can ride smaller stabilizers. And certainly higher skilled people can ride smaller stabilizers, no problem. The other thought process is that a smaller stabilizer is much faster. And I hear this all the time. Oh, I tried the stabilizer. Oh, it's so much faster. It's like, did you measure it with your GPS and compare that measurement with the other one? No, it just feels faster. It might feel faster because it's less stable, that it's more responsive, right? Now, you have a more responsive foil at 18 miles an hour. It feels faster than the more stable one at 18 miles an hour. You're actually going exactly the same speed. And Devin Mance actually did a video, I think 3 years ago or something like that, where he compared a number of stabilizers of different sizes. And he was really surprised, but he did it scientifically. He measured the speed. He actually did it using camera timestamps around a course. And what he found was that there was no difference in speed for what he was doing, which is pump foiling, which is relatively low speed. So it's a specific result to that, right? He found no difference. He was extremely surprised. He thought there was going to be a difference in speed. There was no difference in speed between the biggest one and the smallest one. And then he did something else. He tried shimming. And what he did is he shimmed to the front of the stabilizer to reduce the downforce. And then he found a difference in speed. So tuning the stabilizer can result in a dramatic difference in speed. Now, if you go to a smaller stabilizer, there is less surface area. So there will be a reduction in speed, and I don't deny that. But I will say that it might not be all that significant. And there are manufacturers that I respect. I was watching a video from Code Hydrofoil, and I haven't ridden one, but their hydrofoils look great, and what they are saying makes sense. I think their design philosophy is right on target. Their construction looks good. But they seem very focused towards downwind paddling. So it may be different. I don't know really how, what they're offering for winging. I don't know that much about their company. But they came out, this was a comparison of 3 stabilizers, and I think it was a 140, a 150, or 160, or sizes close to that. But I mean, it was 10 square centimeter increments, tiny, right? Absolutely tiny. And is it really going to make a drag difference? Like, you could ride 2 inches higher on your strut and reduce the wetted surface area on your mast as much as reducing this. And is that much faster? I don't know. And as I said, I wing foil, I kite foil, I'm kind of an advanced intermediate guy. I'm not ripping waves. I'm not denying that people that are like very dependent on very fast maneuvers in a wave or downwind subfoiling, that they might prefer one stabilizer to another. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm okay with that. But these claims that like, oh, this stabilizer created so much more lift, or this stabilizer is so much faster, when no one bothers to measure the speed. Like, so these are unsubstantiated claims. And I'm an engineer and I'm a scientist, and I don't like that.
Fair enough. So what's like obviously there's positive shimming and negative shimming, and there's an angle of attack that's set by the front wing. Yep. So then just by playing with that pitch, you're going to get some differences. That makes sense.
Yeah, on most foils, you can you can adjust the shim on the back. There's certain foils where it's not adjustable.
Okay.
There's certain brands that have a tail piece with the stabilizer attached. There's certain foils that are just, the bottom is one piece, like the Mike slab. There's no adjustment at all. But Mike does a pretty nice job of setting up his foils, so there shouldn't be a problem in most cases, unless he's doing a prototype or something where he doesn't know where it should be. And like lift foils, I don't think it's adjustable. Like the tail piece and the thing is one piece. You might be able to somehow, yeah.
I think AFS gave you the option with the 850, but they had set it up, and he was saying it was perfectly balanced.
It might be. If you're providing a complete foil, and I have to say, like, some brands are very good at testing, like I see the videos of what Ken Winter does in developing the duotone wings. I think he's an amazing self-taught engineer. I mean, and just the level of testing, and it shows in the performance of the product. There's no doubt, and I know other brands are very serious about testing, but as far as the hydrofoils for some brands that mostly offer wings or kites, and then they have to have a hydrofoil, it can be kind of a toss-off product. Like, we need a foil line,
Fair enough.
And then also, when you get into a situation where the big three, like, would be Axis, Armstrong, SAB, they offer 20 different wings, they offer 12 different stabilizers, they offer different fuselage lengths, they offer different mast lengths. By the time you pick your wing, your stabilizer, your fuselage, your mast, there's absolutely no certainty that the stabilizer will. How could there be? How could you do it? How would it work that every wing, particularly fuselage length, is going to have a huge influence? Because now you're changing the length of the lever arm that the stabilizer is working against, right? So basically what I do is I compensate. So if I offer a smaller stabilizer, I'll design the wing saddle area so that it will have an increased angle to compensate for the reduction in area.
Okay.
So, and then when I offer a longer fuselage, like, for instance, this is for the M-frame setup. So this is sort of the kite foiling length. And then this is typically the wing foiling length, which is about, I don't know, what is that? I'd say 5 inches longer, maybe, right? Okay. So the angle of attack on this one in the saddle will be less than on this one. So there'll be more downforce to compensate for the reduction in lower arm. So I try to make it so that they'll all work, but it also depends. I think beginners and intermediates like a little bit more stabilizer angle because it makes the foil more stable. Whereas when you get a little bit more advanced, I find I really need to shim on production Delta stuff. I do one shim under the front of the stabilizer. I really like it like that. And so, there's a certain amount of personal preference. But again, I talk about this over and over and over again. Adjust your stabilizer. And I even have, the best thing, if you're really going to get serious about it, is you can make a tool to measure the angle between the front wing. And it's basically a metal caliper.
Okay.
And you cut little notches. Actually, I grabbed the wrong one. This one doesn't have them. But you take a file and you file a V notch in both jaws. And then what you can do, you can take a hydrofoil like this one, which is assembled. And you can clamp those V notches into the front and into the back so that this is now held tightly at the angle of the wing. And I kind of wish I had the right caliper instead of the wrong one. But this is what I got. Okay. And then there's one of these automatic level gauge. The brand I like is called a AWSI. The cheap Harbor Freight ones don't work. They're not accurate enough. But basically what you can do is this has magnets in it. So this just clips to the top and you turn it on. Was it turn on? Oh yeah, now it's on. So you turn it on and then this little button is the 0. So now you have a 0 angle for this. And then what you can do is you move this thing to your stabilizer and you can get the angle measurement relative to the front wing. Normally it can vary, but generally around 2.5 degrees is pretty typical. And it's also different depending on what you're doing. Like if you're wake foiling, I would say 2.5 degrees, 2.8 degrees. Maybe on a short fuse with a really small stabilizer, it could be 3.5 degrees, but it's good to know what it is. And then when you shim it, you measure it again and you can keep notes. And then, if you're switching wings, you're switching setups, just keep track of what you prefer. I was talking to Kane DeWile at AWSI, and he's a very talented engineer, very smart guy. And it's done a lot of pioneering work in the downwind paddle area and also, with winging and foiling in general for surf. And using really small stabilizers now. And I'm like, man, you got to be running a high angle of attack with a stabilizer like that. And he says, no, not really. Like a lot of times I'll run 1.5 degrees. I've even run 0 degrees. And I was really confused by it. I didn't understand it. It was so different from my experience. And then I realized he wasn't really talking about wake foiling. He was talking about downwind paddling. And the thing is that one of the things that the stabilizer produces downforce to counter is the thrust from the wing. So if you think about it, the driving force to make this thing is at shoulder height. Right? Yeah. So you have this force pulling you, and that force is at your shoulders. You're standing on top of the board. So between your shoulders and the soles of your feet is maybe 5 feet. And then you've got another 3 feet below that to get to your wing, right? And the drag from the hydrofoil is now 8 feet below the thrust. So you have something pulling this way, 8 feet up, and the thing that's pulling back is here. So what does that do? It wants to tilt it nose down. And that's one of the forces that the stabilizer is compensating for. But that doesn't exist in paddle foiling. He doesn't have that thrust line at his shoulders. he's basically gliding down the slope of water, right? So he needs a lot less stabilizer because of that reason. And I'm really glad I talked to him, and and it's great that I'm very open to discussing hydrofoil design with anyone. If they're a competing brand, they design, I'll talk hydrofoils with them. Why wouldn't I?
That's what you love to do.
I like it, right?
Yeah.
And I want everyone to have better hydrofoils. I mean, I'd love if they buy Delta, but if they buy something else, because that's what people in their area ride, that kind of foil, and that's what their local retailer sells, that kind of foil, that fine. I'd still want that foil to be as good as it can be. So I'm willing to share information, at least with people I like.
Well, even when I had started, a couple buddies of mine had talked about you being that pioneer, one of those pioneers with Delta. So I'd heard about it a long time ago. And I said his concepts and his engineering is phenomenal. So definitely the word is out that was the case, which was pretty cool to meet you in person and chat with you at AWSI and then get the chance to talk to you now. It's it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, when I started with hydrofoils, there were so many question marks. It's interesting. And, the other thing about hydrofoils is that they all have this curvature now, right? They all kind of curve down and then they kind of flip up. And I think that was kind of the Spots was the first with the curve down. And then Mike Zajac actually pioneered this little flip up thing. And the reason for that is that if you breach your foil wing like this, that it's a little bit more vertical, so it's more perpendicular to the surface of the water rather than if it's hooked down. And so, you don't tend to pull as much air down the wing when it's more perpendicular like that. But straight, and, every single wing will pretty much have this curvature. I really tried to make straight wings. They just don't work. And really, in kite foiling, the more curvature you have, sort of the more stable it is. But I don't think we really want that much curvature in wing foiling because we need the efficiency, And this is one of the kite wings that we offer. This is the 860. And you can see how much curvature is in that. And there's also a lot of sweep. So sweep is sort of that this goes back instead of being straight. And this also is less efficient, wing sweep like this. But what I find with kiting is that there's so much power from the kite. You can dive the kite and the kite pulls up. So it's so easy to get on foil compared to winging that, you trade efficiency for comfort, for ease of use. But what's interesting is that, this is the smallest kite wing that we offer. It's an 860. And now we offer a smaller winging weight, right?
Yeah.
And actually, we're going to probably offer the 590 as well. So it's going to be quite a bit smaller. So winging has changed a lot. Like winging has gone very high efficiency, very high aspect ratio, and it's good. And when I started winging, I kind of didn't like it. It was really hard to stay upwind at that time. I always felt like I was struggling upwind. It was slow and draggy. I think there's been a lot of hand wing development. The hand wings have gotten really
significantly better.
Really
absolutely
good. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there's really two flavors now. There's deep grunty wings, and then there's flat sort of speedy wings. I kind of like, I think for my 6.5 meter, I like kind of a deep grunty wing. And then for my 5 meter, my 4 meter, and the smaller stuff, I kind of like the thin lifty wings. They are harder to pump up onto foil, but boy, when they get going, they just feel so light in your hands. It's nice.
Yeah, I like one now. I ride the I ride for KT, and I ride they have their 3 meter, and it's super darty. And I love that aspect of it now with longer handles. It pumps well, but it just, if I'm going into attack or I want to move around, the wing is a lot more intuitive. And that's what I like about it. But before, when I was learning the swing or the Strike V1, it just sat there in the pocket, unbelievably stable. I love that at that time of riding, but now I don't like it anymore because I progressed. But
I kind of like it. I have the Duotone D-Lab 6.5 slick.
Okay. Yeah, those are good wings.
Oh my God. That's such a game changer for lightweight. It's an expensive product, but it is notable. It is notably good. And I fly it off the harness, and you can pretty much just release your hands and it just stays. But with the type of wings that you're talking about, and my other wings that I ride, which are smaller, like even if you're in the harness, there's still quite a bit of hand pressure just to stabilize the wing. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I love that much.
Okay, fair enough.
And but the 6.5 meter slick is pretty grunty. It's really easy to pump up on the foil with that.
Oh yeah, big time.
And then the other ones, but what I find is with the other wings I ride are much flatter, and they're tougher to get off foil. But actually, I find that the foil feels different riding that style of wing. Like the foil is loaded more lightly because there's just not as much leeward pull. It's more like a forward thrust. And the foil itself feels different and more lively. I really enjoy it. And those flatter wings also take heavy wind really well. Like you can ride super lit. Like you can be out in a lot of wind on a 5 meter, which that helps getting up. Yeah.
The innovation coming forward, I'm stoked about. Could we go a little bit into what did you release anything new at AWSI or what's coming down the pipe for you?
I think the 590 is coming, and we're going to release probably 2 stabilizers, a 140 and a 160.
All right.
And a lot of people have requested flat stabilizers. Yeah, flat stabilizers are great because they're easy to make. The molds are cheap, and I don't have anything wrong with flat stabilizers. I've used curvature. If you have curvature in your stabilizer, it provides some yaw stability, which is basically the nose going left to right on the foil.
Okay.
So it's kind of like doing the twist,
Yeah.
But I think the thing that makes us really unique is the R-frame design. And I don't know how.
Yeah, so what is that exactly?
So basically, there is no joint between the mast and the fuselage. I think you can see that now in the light. So almost every other foil manufacturer has some sort of connection here. And
correct.
So basically, the top of this is solid. There's no connection there. This is one piece all the way from the top plate to the wing saddle. And also, I elected to use a greater thickness of strut. It's 18 millimeters thick. But this airfoil section for the mast or strut, however you want to refer to it, is well selected, so we never get any sort of ventilation or flow separation, which some other brands that have 19, 20 millimeters thick struts, all of a sudden, like air just comes sucking down the thing. We never have that regardless of the speed. But what it's created by eliminating this joint, every single joint has a little bit of play in it, regardless of how well it's designed. It just, bolts actually stretch. Like when you tighten out a bolt, it actually stretches a little bit. And then when you put tension on it, it stretches more. So there's always a little bit of give. And there's also breakage because there's a lot of warranty issues where if you think of the mast going into that slot, so like our M frame, right? The mast slots into this. It's like a giant crowbar trying to pry this thing apart, and eventually it does. Like particularly, if you run around a lot or you jump or you'll just put tremendous stress, and eventually they tend to crack around here and fail. And it's every brand suffers with these types of failures. I mean, I guess if you were to make this out of aluminum, you could be, you'd be better off, but then you have to deal with that weight and the corrosion issues of aluminum. But I don't think that aluminum is necessarily a bad choice if a company goes that way. But, you just have to make sure that the stuff is rinsed properly. It is heavier. And then, you can still travel with it because the tail boom comes off. So it disconnects here with 2 screws.
Okay.
So, this front part is only this long. So you can still travel with it without a problem. But what it's resulted in is the mass is astonishingly stiff, like crazy stiff. And yeah, there is a tiny drag penalty of having a thicker mast, but you can go 24 miles an hour on this, no problem. It's like, and honestly, most people aren't into going that fast. So but I like it. I enjoy it. But so I think I made the proper set of compromises on this setup. And, the wing mounts with just 3 bolts. So this is really unique in the industry. No one really has this design, and you can feel the stiffness. It feels incredibly solid and stable. I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to try it at AWSI,
Yeah, well, I will next year when I'll see you then, definitely.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the Armstrong setup where they have that fuse going through there? Or even I was talking to Omen the other day, and they did have that other setup like your M1 that you have there, but they were using stainless steel.
Well, what happens is you get stuck. Whatever you start with, you're stuck with that infrastructure that you set up. And that if you change it, then all your stuff is no longer compatible, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think always with that sort of socket system, it's really hard to get it dead nuts perfect, because it's always a slip fit. And all the guys that ride GoFoils have mallets. Alex Aguirre brings a mallet, and then you're hammering the thing on, which isn't that bad, right? But then you have to hammer it off. So now you're kind of hammering on the trailing edge. That's not so great, and let's face it, everybody, one of the things is because wing foiling wings are so much bigger span than kiting wings, the leverage on that joint is much higher than it's ever been. I don't think we had as much of a problem with it for kiting, and that's why that's where the M frame comes. I mean, this type of setup with an aluminum strut, like I have it set up here. So the M frame was the original system we came up with, and we have a carbon fiber type plate that mounts to aluminum, and also carbon fiber fuse. So it's all carbon except for the aluminum strut. And the aluminum strut has a much thinner wall, so it's quite light. It's actually not anywhere near the weight of a standard aluminum. And the fit on this thing is extremely tight. So I've actually had customers that say, this thing doesn't fit. And that's how tight the fit is, that it's precise. And this works pretty well. And interestingly, as the wings are getting smaller for winging, I think this could start to work well again because there's less of these torsional forces.
Okay,
but
that makes sense.
With aluminum, it's always a thing with corrosion. People don't rinse their stuff. Then the bolts are stuck in there, and but yeah, this joint, I was happy to get rid of it, but then you can't offer aluminum. We only have it in 85 centimeters. Maybe when we see a clear need for a very specific different height, we might bring out a different length mast. But 85 seems to kind of fit the bill.
I think it's a great height. That's the standard that a lot of us are riding, even if it is some waves or swell. Like that 85 is a nice height.
Yeah, but I'm pretty happy with the way the aluminum came out. That the wall is maybe like a 1/16 of an inch, so there's really a lot of hollow in this, and it's really not. It's not much heavier than our carbon. We also offer a carbon strut, which is interchangeable for this aluminum one. And, the aluminum we offer in a bunch of lengths. We have it in 24 inches, 28 inches, 32 inches, and 36 inches. So if someone has a very specific preference for a length, then they should do that in aluminum. And it's also pretty inexpensive. Our regular retail on the M frame is $1,200, which is for, high performance gear, really is a good price.
Yeah, that's pretty decent.
And the R frame is, I think, $1,950 complete. And we're also, now they're offering 2 other lengths of tail. We're offering a tail to make it sort of the same length as the kite foiling thing, but there's people that like really short fuselages now, so they might use that for winging as well. And then we have an intermediate length tail that's coming out. So we have the short one and we have the long one, and the intermediate one we'll probably have in a couple of months. And then we have the 2 new stabilizers that are coming out, probably the 590. I don't know how much of an audience we'll have for the 590. I don't know if it'll be popular. I know for sure so many people would be happy with the 700. They may think that it's too small, but it's just not the case.
Yeah, I love that 850. They did a good job on it. I was just overall, I'm used to riding a bigger wing. It gave me a lot of lift. It gave me a lot of glide.
So I think Armstrong and a bunch of other brands are kind of, and GoFoil, they're kind of stuck with what they started with. And
fair enough.
A lot of times, like, I know Armstrong at some point changed that they had some bolts that went through from side to side. And like now, if you look at one of their setups, there's a lot of bolts going in at various angles. There's been some people that, have shown up with older foils from that manufacturer, and the fitment, the wing was very loose. In one case, the fuselage was actually broken inside of that sleeve that the mast attaches to, so you could just kind of wobble it. And they were beginners. They had bought the gear used or whatever, and were struggling, And if I could have repaired it, I would have repaired it for them, but I just it's too messed up. I can't fix this. I mean, you should just probably get a Delta. And again, immediately they saw a huge improvement. There are a lot of people out there on gear that's not set up right, that's broken, that is maybe old and was not good. Maybe it was like the best that they had at that time, but there's a lot better gear now. And it really hurts beginners and intermediates. Like they can really have their progress impeded and they're not having fun. Like you're going out and you're falling and you're struggling, and then, it degrades your confidence. Oh, I suck. And like, who needs that? And so for me, and this is weird because I buck trends a little bit, right? Like I see this trend towards shorter and shorter fuselages, smaller and smaller stabilizers. And I said, you're making the foil less stable. You're making it harder to ride. And there's no doubt that these 18-year-old hotshot guys that I see at AWSI doing forward flips, pumping up onto foil in flat water, doing amazing stuff, like they would prefer that. Like they need something that's ultra responsive, ultra turny. 90% of people don't need it and they don't want it. Like that's not going to serve them, and yet there are a lot of influencers telling them, no, buy this this will make you faster. This will make you better, People want to sell things too. Like it's a business, there's marketing but yeah, I don't know. I much prefer to set my customers up with something that's going to make them have more fun. And I've done it. I see it on a local level, people I interact with one-to-one, and I end up spending a lot of time with them, and this is all about retailers. Retailers earn their money by spending time with the customer. It's, and I have really good relationships with Green Hat Kiteboarding. They sell Delta. They believe in it. They've done a huge amount for me. And at AWSI, they come out and they test all the gear very thoroughly. And they sell stuff that they know it works and that it's going to work for their customers. And that's how they get their repeat business. And I believe in that.
So for a heavier rider, though, that wants to go out in pretty light wind,
I would recommend the 1740 at that point. For beginners, I recommend for someone that's 150, 140 to 180, 185, I would recommend the 1400.
Okay.
Which is, I call it a high aspect. It's a mid aspect, but it's a good wing. And you want to grow it. But then I would recommend that they maybe drop down to the 1050 or the 850 once they can get up on foil fairly easily and ride and jibe and go back. Like, I think, my doctor rides Delta. I got him into foiling. He was a kiteboarder. He twin tipped. And the thing is that around here, it blows 12 miles an hour and he shows up with his twin tip. He can't go out. And, we're out there on foils ripping it up. And, I said, you're good enough to do this. I mean, kite foiling looks hard and people are intimidated by it. I said, you can learn this. I'll set you up with gear. You learned it. And he learned to kite foil pretty quickly. And then the winging came along and I said, yeah, you should go for it. I can recommend gear. I sent him to Green Hat and I sailed with him yesterday. It was 2:00. The wind filled in. It was blowing 13, 14. And we went out and had a blast. Big smile coming back into the beach and said, I'm so glad you got me into this. And so that's kind of what I'm in it for. And I feel like I can't help a huge number of people, but I've helped 4 or 5, and hopefully Green Hat is doing that too. And other people that ride Delta are spreading the word. So yeah, it's good. And, our manufacturing is good. I think our approach is good. And I'm more than happy to, sell shorter fuselages and smaller stabilizers to people that are looking for higher performance stuff. And obviously, if I'm offering a 500 and 700 and I'm recommending them, then yeah, Delta is performance gear. But it also works for beginners. That's the thing, and you're not paying a premium to do it. Like, yeah, you can buy a closeout unit right now. There's so many sales and closeout stuff, but a lot of the closeout stuff, maybe it works okay, or maybe it's not great, but I suspect that if you buy the closeout stuff, as you get better, you'll outgrow it and you'll have to buy better stuff down the line anyway. And it may impede your learning. It may make it hard. So
yeah, that's what Richard was saying from AFS when I talked to him. His recommendation was going for slightly higher quality, something that you enjoyed to ride, was higher performance, and he felt it would last a lot longer. And that was his take on it for sure.
Yeah,
same as
that's
yours.
my take. I like quality. I mean, I ride the Alula wings and I like them and I pay extra for them. Unfortunately, the sad reality is that these wings, if you ride often, if you do 20 sessions a year, maybe you do 40 sessions a year. I don't know. I probably ride 30, 40 times a year.
Oh, okay.
They wear out. They blow out.
Yeah,
the
quickly.
Canopies stretch and the performance degrades a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go much slower. They're much less forward. They're draggier. It's not that they like pop or tear or wear out and you can't use them anymore. It's just that they don't perform anymore. And I'm kind of hoping that there's some manufacturers, Ocean Rodeo for one, but there are others that are incorporating new materials into the canopy, which I hope will preserve the performance for at least a couple of seasons rather than just one. Yeah. If you're someone that rides 10 times a year, you probably get 2 years out of the wing. It's hard because you pay a lot of money for these wings. And I bought three Alula wings. It was $6,000, and that lasted one season.
Yeah.
And the resale value on these used wings is close to nothing, which is what it should be. I can't,
Yeah, that's fair. Well, is there anything else you want to cover? We've been talking for a while. It's been an awesome chat.
Well, I think, just that I have tremendous gratitude for being able to be kind of on the front end of this stuff because, I was able to get into windsurfing just as windsurfing was kind of taking off and shortboards were happening. I was super passionate about windsurfing. I thought I'd be doing it my whole life, Then kiting came along and I got in on that probably earlier than it probably would have. I would have had less injuries and less post-traumatic stress if I had gotten in once they had depower systems and chicken loops that could be opened.
Oh yeah, 2 meters. 2-line 5 meters would have been terrifying.
Yeah, well, then I started flying ram air kites that were 2-line, that were designed for ice and snow. But it was a good time. It was scary at times, but and then, I got going super early in the kite foiling stuff, and then right at the beginning of the wake foiling, I've made so many friends and had so many good times. I just feel really blessed to have been able to do it.
Yeah. Did you ever think your early career would lead to like promoting joy in this way or that you would have such a rich journey through the whole thing?
Yeah, I hoped I would. I felt like when I was sailing small boats and racing small boats, and I loved it, but the performance, they're slow and it's like a lot of work. And then the windsurfing seemed like the next thing, and it was fast. You were really powered up and you were just banging over the water. And then the kiting thing came, and that you had the lift. But I think my whole life, what I really wanted was the hydrofoil. And eventually I got it, and then eventually I was one of the people that really kind of brought it to fruition. And it has, the one takeaway from AWSI is, my God, this is a hydrofoil show.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like, it's a hydrofoil show. And we didn't see that when it was kiting. When it was just kite foiling, kite foiling was a little segment of kiting. It was never more than like a third of it, if that. But with winging, all winging is foiling.
Mm-hmm. It's a precursor to foiling, and then in its basic essence, surfing.
Yeah. And now we're seeing it go in entirely other directions. It's winging, but now the hottest thing, presumably, and I don't know how big this really will be, is the downwind paddle foiling. But I think people that do it really love it, and I hope it becomes big.
There's a lot of logistics to it. It's not, you can't do it everywhere. You got to have an easy entry point upwind, downwind. You got to have cars. You got to have all that stuff. But it seems, you never know.
Something might come along, maybe a super small deployable kite that would get you downwind that you can just. I saw a video. They had like a very basic kind of small kite that they could get up on foil. And they just snuffed it right down into a bag. Like, it was so small. So you never know where these things go. And like,
you're right.
And the surf foiling itself is starting to take off.
Oh, like,
paddling in prone or paddling in on a paddleboard that's a foil, or getting towed in. You're seeing Kai Lenny hydrofoiling big waves because you need the speed. It's just, and not just Kai. There's obviously other people.
There's a lot, yeah.
He's the a big popularizer of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm really grateful for all of it, and I think also winging is a kind of saving the industry. We need that growth. I'm told that kiting is still more than winging right now. There's still more kites sold worldwide, and certainly, I love kiting. I'm not giving it up. I actually kited this afternoon. It was blowing about 10, 12 miles an hour. I was ripping it up. It was phenomenal. Yeah. So I kind of enjoy it all, and maybe I'll learn how to downwind subfoil. I love it. So yeah, all my friends are from wind sports, and I had a prior career. I was in metal finishing, electroplating, and I taught at a university as an adjunct professor for 20 years. Had a lot of students, enjoyed that. I think after 20 years of doing one thing, you're kind of ready to do something else. And I had invented a bunch of technologies in that industry as well, and was really successful, and it was worthwhile work. But I had this passion for wind sports. I was always sneaking out of work at 3:00. And my freaking, and I could get away with it. Like, no one said anything, but man, my coworkers just hated it. Like, that guy just leaves whenever he wants to leave. Nothing happens. That guy's an asshole.
But it's so fun, man.
Yeah, but I felt guilty. Like, and at that time I had a young family and my wife, and I would blow out of work at 3:00, and then go down to the beach. Of course, my young child is at home with my wife, right, who's ready for a break from childcare, and I'm on the water, and like I'm parking illegally on a side street to sneak down to the beach. Like, why do I feel so guilty, dude? You ditched work, you ditched your family, you're parked illegally, you're not even supposed to be here. That's why you're feeling guilty, So. Yeah,
it makes sense that you would want to start your own company and more involved. And then
I was ready. And I looked at that old Carafino foil, and it was so conspicuously not hydrodynamic. There were so many things that just looked wrong about it. And I was ready to take it on at that point. I think maybe it was a little bit of a midlife crisis. I think I was just around 50 years old at that time, and I had the energy to do it. And I put a lot of passion and work into it, and learned a shitload.
Started at 50.
Yeah.
Wow, good for you.
Well, with the business. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good lesson for a lot of kids now who the lack of motivation and the drive to do stuff is at such a high level now. It's nice to hear this.
I see.
Depends where you're. On
guys,
Vancouver Island, yeah, it's sometimes it's tough to see the kids. Yeah, it's tough.
First of all, our sport's too expensive. Like, we really lack. Like, the young people you see are people that grew up in families that were water sports families.
Yeah, very true.
And they're industry sponsored. Like, and probably not enough to support them, but they get their gear. They get some travel money, but like. A not super talented person that just grows up somewhere, maybe they live, a half an hour from the water, their parents are both working, and like, well, how much is it? It looks fun. How much? And you tell them, well, it's $5,000. It's like, well, that's not possible. Like 500 would be a lot. You know what I mean?
Did you see the post by Taddy Franz there? Franz, he posted that on Facebook, and that was the exact point he was making, was that on Bonaire, it's like, sure, this is amazing. I love this gear, but not everybody's fortunate enough to be sponsored or to get gear at a discount or for free.
Yeah.
Will this gear ever drop in price? Do you think it will ever drop in price?
Or well, it has now.
Yeah, but like
now you could, I mean,
yeah, fair enough.
This time you can get brand new, like there are going to be package deals that are just above $2,000 for a board, a foil, and a wing, and will it be great stuff? It'll be adequate stuff. If you're an athletic kid and you're into it, you could make that work. You can get foiling. Is $2,000 still too much for a kid? Yeah. I don't know. It's the same with windsurfing. It's the same thing with kiting. And, in terms of kids on islands, I spent a little time on Union Island, and, they desperately, like bicycles that we throw away, bicycles that you see on curbs. Kids in those islands would love to get a bicycle like that, right? The problem is that those islands all have incredible import tariffs. So you can't bring it in as a sellable good, no matter how cheap. Like the tariffs are really, really high, and there are people, I know people that go to the Caribbean, they've got kite stuff, they leave their stuff there. Like they'll bring some old stuff and they'll leave it. But the thing is, the stuff wears out, the bladders pop, and now they just don't have the skills or to maintain the equipment. And this is the same with surfing. There's people that are working to get kids on Tahiti and various other islands, like to get them surfboards. Surfboards compared to what this sport's about, surfboards are cheap, right? Like what's a new surfboard? $400. It's still too much.
Yeah.
For, so.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's a difficult thing. I would really like to see some accommodation to be made where you could gather. There's so much used kite surf stuff that still would be safe. It's got a depower system. It's got a chicken hoop that works. Maybe it's 10 years old, but 10-year-old kites are still safe. Mm-hmm. And people are just throwing them out. No one wants to buy that. There's no resale value. Why? If we could get that kind of stuff, put it in a container and ship it to these places and make it but there would have to be someone that oversees it, a instruction program, maybe a destination place, that runs. It's a lot of work. It would be a full-time job to provide opportunities for kids in those locations to do it. And then really their only way forward is to be in the industry, like to be a sponsored rider. And, you have to have some talent in order to compete at those levels. And there's a number of people that do.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's shown them the world, sadly, those places are still afflicted with what colonialism did. Those people were exploited, and then when you could make sugar in some cheaper way in some other place, they're just abandoned. And, Haiti is maybe one of the saddest examples. And that place was based on, they actually had, conditions were so bad that there was a slave rebellion and they built their own republic after having a revolution. But because of that, they were pretty much marginalized by every country that was depending on that sort of cheap labor. And, sadly, conditions where we are very bad. So, these things, it's too expensive for young people in the United States, and young people in the United States are some of the most affluent people in the world. So, if you go to other places in the world, it will be worse.
But I guess you are right in saying that as gear progresses, then hopefully over time that we will get more and more like options that are coming in at a lower price point as things progress. It's only
already
natural.
there. I mean, we're there.
It's only
we
natural. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to wait for that. You know,
Yeah.
we have that now. You can get pretty. If you want to get a wing foiling setup with one wing, and the board and a foil, you can get that for $2,000. You know, there are options for doing it. You could do some used things. There's marketers from China doing direct marketing into the United States that are doing that. You know,
that's true.
That's not great for the industry, the U.S. industry, the retailers that, you know, they copy an existing, like a very typical thing is that they copy like a Nash thruster, and now they're selling, you know, on Alibaba, you can get a copy of a Nash thruster for $400 or something. And some people do.
Wing Here or Wing Hire brand. Yeah, they're from China. They're fairly low price, but still, to get started, you know what? They're fine. My buddy has one on Vancouver Island, and I was riding KT, and it was a more powered up day, and obviously mine performed better, but his was fine. Like, if you want to get up and just move, there's nothing wrong with that. Like the first versions of the Nash were these little bed sheets, which powered up in 25 knots. You can pump them in low wind, but who cares? You could still get going in higher wind. It just depends what you want to do.
It's tough to learn.
Yeah, it's
tough to learn. And but you know, if you're super motivated, you can do it. My situation is, you know, I mean, I can afford the sport. And I mean, how much have I spent on gear over the last 40 years? So much. Yeah, no kidding. You know, the stuff, when I got out of windsurfing, I just gave the stuff away for, you know, and I knew how much I had carbon masts, $400 for a mast, you know, $500 for carbon, all that stuff every sale was $500, $600. I just gave it all away. And even that wasn't that easy, because, you know, the stuff's kind of out of date.
Yeah, there are many windsurfers left. I still windsurf, and I just got myself my first skinny carbon boom this year. And yeah, it's $1,000, and you put your pennies away, and then you super appreciate it when you pick it up. But I'm just so happy that there's options out there for people to experience a little bit more, a little more happiness, a little more get outside. The community is phenomenal. So for that stuff, I'm super thankful for pioneers and for people like yourself that have dedicated a lot of their time and put resources behind it just to do this. You didn't have to do this. You could have done other things, but...
No, I wanted to do it.
there you go.
You know, it's funny. My wife, I've been married for over 30 years. And
hey, congrats.
And, you know, someone asked her, like, you know, how is it that George, like, learned how to do this? And she said, he was born to do this. Like, this is what he was born to do. And she's right. I mean, this is, you know, and I was in industry. I visited electronics plants all around the world, but I don't know. I did have a passion for my work, but I didn't have a passion for being inside of electronics plants. You know, now when I test my engineering designs, I have to put on sunblock. You know, I have to travel someplace warm. So it's a whole different story. But I'm glad you brought up windsurfing, because I had such a passion for it. And there was something really special about just hanging off the boom, like being in the straps and just like committing your weight and being lifted by that sail.
Oh, yeah.
But I get it from winging now. Like, I get that same sensation. It's brought me full circle. It's so close to windsurfing in a way, you know?
Yeah. So closer. Yeah. Yeah. If you're hooked in, yeah, definitely.
I ride hooked in all the time. Anyone that will ask me, I'll recommend that they get a harness. And it helps with getting upwind. You ride up. It just takes the pressure off your hands. You can ride longer. For me, at this point, the one thing about winging is it's pretty physical. I would say that it's higher exertion than the kite foiling. Maybe not the kite foil racing, but like just recreational kite foiling. You don't even break a sweat, really, if you do it right. But the winging is definitely like a higher exertion level. I find it challenging. I can't do like 2-hour sessions, but it is phenomenal for fitness, And I ran into Mike Zychek, who does Mike Slab's foils. And I mean, he rides, he sails, he foils, but I saw him this year and he looked really fit. It looked like he had lost some weight, and I mentioned it to him. He says, "Oh, no, it's the same. I haven't changed." No, he looks fitter. He lost weight. And I think it's winging. Like you get out there and you just want to do it and you're exercising at a high level of exertion for, like, would you run for 2 hours? How much fun would it be to run for 2 hours? Like you wouldn't do it. So yeah, I think all in all, it's good. And I plan to be at it for as long as I can. I often wonder, like, is there more to do? Like, is hydrofoil design, like you could say there's nothing really new in windsurfing sails, right? Or windsurfing. Like at some point it's complete. I think maybe we're getting close, but I think they'll just be different applications, like this downward paddling thing, or maybe the place for the most development is surfing, because I think it's the hardest thing to quantify. Because people that surf, it's all about the feel. Like, I feel this, I feel that. And I don't discount what they feel on the water, but it's extremely difficult then to act on it, to improve it. Like, I don't really know how to make a physical change in the foil to improve what they'll feel,
Okay.
And that's the hardest. Like, if you're just trying to go faster, then it's pretty clear what you need to do. Or if you want a foil that gets up sooner, it's pretty clear what you need to do. But in terms of control and maneuverability, it's a lot more subtle. So maybe there is still room for improvement. About 4 years ago, I got the opportunity to ride a Spots 1, which was like the original foil I started with 10 years ago.
Oh, cool.
And I was shocked at how hard it was to ride and how slow it was. And this was a race foil. Yeah. And it was freaking difficult to ride, really hard to control it. And it was also very slow. And now looking at it, I can see what was wrong with it. Like, it had way too much camber in the wings, and it wasn't stiff enough, and various other things. The strut and the wing were too close together. I really like to have the mast or the strut set further back from the wing, because it imparts yaw stability, and I think it also improves various performance parameters of the wing. And some designers are very clued into that, and some less so. So in hindsight, it's pretty clear, but it's amazing because back 10 years ago, we had it difficult. Like, the equipment was not great. It was hard to ride. Things are much easier now, much better. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a good time to get into it. And I'm so happy that there's a lot more people getting in, and I give lessons, and every once in a while, these are people who had never seen wind. They never thought they'd be on the water. And the amount of excitement they get, and then the feeling they get of how quiet it is and how much they can sightsee, and all these new experiences for them. I just get so stoked for them, because you never know where it's going to take them.
Yeah, it's a magic carpet ride,
Yeah.
And with the winging, they're much less likely to be killed than with the kite foiling.
Significantly less.
I haven't had a wing drag me over a parking lot full of cars yet.
Or the one I've heard that when you're getting it's they buck on it, I guess, and the foil comes up and it gets caught up in the lines and turns them into a good old death loop. That's one thing I've heard about. Doesn't happen often.
That doesn't happen often. Like, I think the thing that really kind of gets a lot of people that I don't like, it's really scary, is kind of the taco fold to leeward. Like, all of a sudden like, you're falling to leeward and the foil is coming up, and it's like, oh, and there's like, how do you extricate yourself from that? And, I've got all sorts of freaking scars all over me from my shins are just like a disaster. It's been worth it. So, well, thanks so much for reaching out. I'm glad I was able to, chat with you. It's super comfortable. And
yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah, maybe we'll get you out on the Delta. I'd like to.
Yeah, I would love to try that. And if I don't see you before AWSI next year, thanks for coming on. And we'll have to have you back on and chat some more. Now, obviously, I take a lot of comments and questions from the community. So if there's anything specific, I'll just reach out to you and we can do another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, deltahydrofoil.com, that's our website. Mac Kiteboarding carries Delta. Green Hat Kiteboarding carries Delta. We have a shop in Harris that carries Delta. So, yeah, we have stuff in stock. We have the 700s. And, I think for winging, I would, if you have a lower budget, then you can definitely do the M-frame system for $1,200 and get a really high performance wing. And then if you decide to do an all carbon system, you can do the R-frame and all the wings will work. Everything's compatible.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, George.
Take care.
Hey, thanks a lot. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight.